So, welcome.
Thank you.
I like the setting actually, right next to the works. So, you know, once we start talking about the works, maybe you can just direct us and show us which work we need to show us. Anyway, so welcome everybody. I'm really glad to be here with Asa. We'll be talking about her work specifically, but also I think we'll be touching on issues of art and craft, art and design, art and gender, art and identity, art and consumption. We hope to be touching art and taste. So we hope to be touching on all these issues. Now, I'd like to start with some general questions at first. We're in the context of a glass exhibition, you know, a contemporary craft exhibition focused specifically on glass. And I mean, glass isn't a material that we generally associate with contemporary art, but there is, of course, we know this trend now within contemporary art to use these kinds of crafty materials. I mean, only in Venice in the past 3 or 4 years I can remember glass dress organized by the Berengo Institute, the Fragile exhibition, which was like a historical outline of the use of glass within modern and contemporary art. So there is this interest, there seems to be this interest. Now I'm curious about what brought you to this material. I mean, why were you interested in glass? And because there's this artisanal side to it, and to your work there's this contemporary artistic endeavors. So what brought you to this material?
I mean, I've been working with this material and specializing in it for 20 years, and the reason I started to work with the material, I don't really know. I was like young, angry, and wanted to do something with my hands. So that was more or less a coincidence, I would say. But I got stuck to working with the material because it was hard to learn. It took a lot of my energy, and then in a way the material learned me to focus. But I was keep on working with the material because for me it's, I always say that I use material as my language, that my spoken language is not good enough to be able to express myself. I use material, and the glass has been my main material a little bit because it suits the artistic concepts I'm working with, that the material itself is always a little bit too beautiful. You have to as we talked a little bit before this, that you can make like a lump on the floor and people would say, oh, it's beautiful. And then I can kind of, in a way, fool people to look at the objects. And then we all of a sudden includes desire or consumption or, different feeling that are included in this material. So I'm based in the craft and I'm trained in the craft, but then entered the university. I spend all my time working with the questions and try to figure out how I could actually get these two things in myself together.
So, I mean, within 20 years, you've been able to negotiate these two aspects, art and craft aspect. The interesting thing is, within contemporary art today, there are lots of artists working with these materials, but they cannot craft the material. And there was a recent book out some years ago called The Art of Not Making. I mean, there are so many artists working with glass, but they cannot craft the material, so they have to have some technician to do it for them. What does it mean, and when you look at this kind of work from the outside, you see so many work with material, but it's not made by the artist, but then your work, you actually craft the material. What kind of a difference is that?
I mean, I've been working in both situations. Sometimes I have like a big group of people helping me, and sometimes I craft it myself. So because I've been working in different situations, but for me, I don't think I could express myself if I wouldn't able to touch the actual material. For me, that's a very important part, even if though sometimes I have people helping me because they can make it bigger and better. But that's very important for me.
You need to
because
touch
then I in an intuitive way I can translate something.
Yeah, I think that's important. I mean, this need for touching the material is an important aspect of the work, and actually I think we can feel it in your work.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of my later questions, but maybe it's the time to ask now. I mean, how much do you discover the form in the material, and how much of it is pre-planned, especially, I mean, in works like this, which have some kind of bodily metaphors, you know, formal metaphors.
Yeah. I would say it's a mix. Like on that sculpture, I'm gonna make a snippa and I have a plan for it. But while I'm working with it, I also am open-minded for what's happening on the way in the process. Or if I make the shell, for example, I mean, okay, I know I'm gonna make a shell, but blah blah blah. There could be things going on that I haven't really. I couldn't know from the start that it should look like that.
Yeah. So is glass, in that sense, quite an experimental material? Would you say?
I would say both, because sometimes when you work with molds to make like really, like the big lipstick, I have molds, and then everything is planned.
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, then you're not surprised how the result comes out. It's more the free sculpturing, maybe. So it depends on which craft method you are actually using.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. Now going back to this idea of craft, maybe we can now talk a little bit about art making from a woman's perspective, because I mean, when we think of the concept of craft, it really has been elevated by women artists in the 1960s and 70s. You know, there was so much use of different craft materials, techniques, and that was a great contribution to contemporary art, the development of contemporary art. So where do you see yourself within that history? I mean, do you associate yourself as kind of, you know, coming like the third generation feminist art, or, you know, how do you situate yourself?
I mean, if I didn't have my aunt sisters, I wouldn't be here today. So of course you have a relationship with, if there are a female artist or a female crafts artist. I mean, they are of course important, what they've been doing in their practice, and without them I don't think I could exist. But for me it was also important that the issues that I wanted to talk about was connected to not my own problems, but my own time of being a human. And so of course it's related to the history, but again it's about today and what I have experienced.
Yeah. And of course, what you have experienced, I mean, we're talking about a lot about consumer culture, I think, when we're looking at Asa's work, also with the design aspect of the work. So that, I mean, I would really agree that it is a reflection of our time and gender identity and identity formation. Do you consider glass as a kind of gendered material? I mean,
what do you mean by
that? I mean that
question?
You know, there are certain materials that are gendered male or female, and glass, maybe it has associations of being fragile, I don't know, transparent. Also, a lot of the objects that come out of glass used in a functional way is used by women. So is it a kind of...
yeah, I mean, in a conceptual level, I worked with the fragility to give the object a double meaning, because you can also crush the myth of what we actually think these objects are talking about. Do you see what I mean? I mean, if I don't believe in this glass, I just drop it on the floor and then it's gone.
Drop it. It would be very exciting.
So it's a part of the story, of course.
Yeah.
But maybe I haven't thought about it as a feminine material. But to discuss the feminist question, you can just, if you don't agree, you can just smash it, and then the future will come.
Okay. Okay, can you talk a little bit about the physicality of the process of making the work? You did mention it, actually. You said you wanted, to touch the material, and you became associated with it because of the energy involved in using it. So,
I think what I like with the process of making glass is that you're actually using your whole body. I wouldn't say it is like dance, but you're constantly moving and you're using both left and right hands, and you're always, not all the time, but most of the time, involving other people that helping you out. So you also have to talk at the same time, and the other person have to help you out, which also causes a little bit of chaotic situation that kind of, I think, brings something good to the process, because you can't control it, really. You can never control it 100%, but you use your whole body, and I think that's, I'm interested in how the body's interacting with a room or a space and together with objects, and that's kind of, I also do that when I'm actually making my stuff, so.
Also, there's, I mean, when we think of glass making, the tradition of glass making, the industry of glass making, it's a very male-dominated practice.
Yeah.
Was there this attraction for you when you started out in your youth, when you were attracted to this material, that this is such a male-dominated practice, and that as a woman you could kind of conquer this practice?
I don't think I understood it in that time, but afterwards I can absolutely see that, because I always want to hang out with my dad in his workshop and with his friends, but I wasn't really included because I wasn't a boy.
What would he do?
He was just, fixing with the boat and, making stuff like male does.
Male stuff.
And I felt, this is very easy for me. I want to be a part of this. Because I understood how it worked. So yes, I think I liked to be included in that male area and to be a part of that. I actually was, when I was a student, I was at Biringo in Merano, and everyone, of course, thought I was a male. Because I was working hard, had short hair, so it's like they couldn't, and I don't care. I say sometimes I'm half woman, half man. I don't care. I look at you as a person. But yes, I thought I liked to be included in that male area. And also I worked as this glass manufacturer in southern parts of Sweden, where I kind of, it was only male working in the workshop, and I kind of deal with that there, asking them to pose for me as a pinuppa. Just open up, taking off shirt, kind of, okay, you are the object, because they were also very aware of that everyone was looking at them while they were working.
That work is a production of photographs, right?
Yeah.
So you also work with, it's associated with glass making, but it's a production of photography, so it's another field that, or discipline that you work in. But I think that's also very interesting, because it's not only about women's bodies or women's gender identity, but male identity, and it's more about, I mean, a lot of this work is more about bodily connotations and how we carry our body around as male or female, and what we've learned really about
exactly,
our
exactly, how we are thought to be taught.
Was there any time when you, within this male-dominated practice, you felt that, well, actually it is a bit hard? You know?
I don't know. I mean, it's I mean, it's hard to learn. It takes many years to have skills enough to actually make certain objects. But no, I liked it.
You enjoyed the challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. But these days, if it's going to be too heavy or too big, I always ask people that are much better than me, and then we can help out.
Okay, now let's start talking about the work then. Now, some of it, as we can see here, is some of the objects are very open and graphic. I mean, as in the lipsticks, the high-heeled shoes, perfume bottles, and so on. Others are more abstract. You know, we can identify them with bodily forms, it seems. Is there a specific reason that you use these two different means of expression? Is it to do with your artistic stance and you being a designer, or you know, how do you negotiate between these two?
I think I mean, if I look at my work, I very often find that it has this really glossy and shiny and very exact expression, and then on the other hand, it's like totally chaos and emotional and very meaty, you know, slimy. And I work with these two different not spirits but energies in the expression in different materials. The control and the shininess and the bodily chaos maybe or something, and I mix them and then they go in and out. And like I always coming back to work with the whole and the pole, for example, as two icons, and
it's almost like, you know, these ideals that we are taught to abide by, but then the more you are taught to abide by these cultural restrictions, stereotypes, the more abjection is needed to come to terms with this kind of thing. So there's the ideal and there's the abject, the things that we keep in, the things that we really feel that we should let go, or can't help letting go. So there's, it's very, I think a psychoanalytical reading of your work would be very interesting in that sense. Now, actually, when I was thinking about the work, I thought of Lucy Lippard, who coined the term eccentric abstraction, because a lot of women artists in the 1960s and 70s, they were using these organic forms, bodily connotations, and so on. And can you talk a little bit about the process in which, for example, a giant like a giant penis comes to the fore in glass, or you know, a giant phallus symbol, or you know, a vagina which you call a monster comes into being. I mean, can you talk about the process that these come into being?
I mean, how the process worked for me? Yeah, emotionally. Yeah, like the monster count was in a way a direct reaction of the sculpture Snippan, which is looks very beautiful, but want to discuss if you have to look at the female gender as something that's just there as a subject and not being an object, and you have to look at the sex as a not connected with motherhood or sexuality. So in the Swedish language, it was important to find a new word that kind of have these values in the word. That was the meaning. So snippan is of course based on a lot of anger, but I didn't show that in the expression. I kind of made this with a nice aesthetic sculpture. And in the monster count, I wanted to show that I was really angry, and I was kind of fed up that we are not equal. We're not looking equally on man and woman. And I was looking at these different movies where there are monsters that comes and scare you, and the aesthetic of the monsters actually looking like vaginas. And I was thinking, okay, this is kind of language you're using to try to scare someone. So then I was thinking, okay, maybe I could scare someone and kind of also show my anger. And then it was important that it was abstract, that it wasn't looking like a vagina.
Like a vagina.
Because then for me it would totally disappear. So it was important that it was abstract and kind of in a fake way breaking in from the ceiling and attacking
to get you.
Yeah. And it was actually made, it was made in for Katarina and Eunice's gallery, Crystal. And it was a kind of a small space, and we used this also red plastic sheets on the room. So when you enter the room, you were kind of stuck with this. There was no room for the viewer. You kind of were a little bit trapped, which were a feeling that we were working with. So yeah, or for example, the big the monument in memory of was like, okay, I want to see what it's like to have. Jag letade efter det här ordet igår. Storhetsvansinne. Megalomania. 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 I have to learn that word. Megalomania. I want to see how. Okay, if I practice that, how does it feel like?
Like a very megalomaniac.
Yeah, and I have to.
Attitude.
Like I make it big, and I have to use like trucks and a lot of machines making this, because it was 9 meters long. So.
Well,
so what's the process like? I very often get like a very clear idea. Okay, this has to be done, and then it takes quite a long time to make that happen. But it's always a very strong feeling. And then I have to try it to materialize it, to see if it actually works or not. I can't really figure out that from the beginning, because it's all about how you work with that object in that specific space.
I mean, a lot of what you're talking about is very emotionally charged.
Yes.
But also very cultural. I find that very interesting. And while you were talking, I was reminded of Freud on I don't know, in one of his pieces on sexuality, as is all of his work on sexuality. But I mean, he talked about the woman's sexual organ being very much like a, you know, not so beautiful, quite ugly, and not so pleasant to look at. I mean, the object of the sexual excitation is actually not very pleasant to look at, he was saying, so that you need to kind of, you know, you
think
need
of a flower, maybe.
Yeah, you need to create a different kind of maybe covering, a sugar coating, I don't know. Because if you look at the object itself, you won't get sexually excited. Of course, this is a very male perspective, as is Freud, and Freudian psychoanalysis. So now, when you were talking, I just suddenly got this, you know, realization, let's say, that, you know, a lot of the objects that you're using are objects that are culturally produced to remind one of sexuality, womanhood, how women should be. So it's like it's like a depiction of sex, but you want to depict the other side as well. You want us to look at sex, the sexual organ itself. What Freud said, it's not such a good idea that you look at it, but you want to put it there, right in your face.
Yes, and then because then you can that people actually worked with the aesthetic of the sex as something ugly, which is a bit scary. Then I think you can. It's hard to meet then. So I want to see if people can see this humoristic in that question and kind of get over it and go on.
Humor is interesting that you use this word. Now, a lot of the symbols that you use, actually, maybe you're criticizing the situation, this cultural situation about gender identity and stereotypes and so on. But then you are criticizing it. There is this criticality, but through recreating those symbols. Do you find that there is a danger in that? Because we are, when we enter this room, we are seduced into this kind of very private space, which is quite, sexually evocative. So don't you think that is a kind of, is there a contradiction there? Do you like that contradiction, or is it something you can't overcome?
I mean, I totally understand your question, but for me I think it's also, like this work was actually made in 2004, and there was a lot of discussion about consuming, and that when women were shopping or consume, there was something ugly and bad about that. And then you have the history of the shopping mall, the Crystal Palace, which was the first public space where actually women could visit by themselves. So it's also something that women has been doing in the history, and why do you have to think that's a bad thing? But still again, consuming is a way of construct your own identity and tell other people who you are. But it's also something problematic, because you can't consume too much, then the earth will die. But why do I make a big lipstick? For me, it was important to show which kind of tools are important for yourself when you try to become that person that you have chosen to be. And for me, that's not necessarily a woman. It can also be a man. And then you have to look, and for me on a personal level, it was also important to try to understand what they meant. For me, I have never used high heels or lipstick, because for me on a personal level that was just something you didn't use. And why? Then I maybe have to deal with it. Okay, maybe I can use both high heel shoes and lipstick if I understand the meaning of it. And for me, like the high heels it's describing a way of showing that you have the power in the public space. Because when you walk in your high heel shoes, you have to walk in a certain ways, and that's become a kind of a weapon. Or the lipstick, it's an important tool for many, many people, but no one says hooray to lipstick. Oh, hello little lipstick, you helped me through life. But it actually does. So it's also a way of like upgrading the need of a lipstick. So and it is, yes, stereotype. All the symbols I work with are stereotype. But we have to look at it and then try to figure out, is this what I've been taught to? I learned this when I was raised to that I should think in certain ways, or can I devaluate and think about it in a new way? So it's also to make the lipstick is a way to get people to look and understand the lipstick.
I understand.
I don't know if that was. I was kind of.
I have two questions actually. from what you said. One is that, you know, this humor aspect, and you're showing the lipstick as a kind of fetishized object of desire for women, but also
or men.
So there's this, and the way that you depict these objects is, I mean, I do get it.
Yeah.
I mean, when I go inside and I see these bodily connotations, and I think of your concept of this sex looking at you right in the face, you are actually kitschifying it, maybe. I mean, I'm curious what you think about kitsch, because kitsch is quite a powerful force. You are, and then we were talking in the cafe. You are actually queering these objects. I mean, like a lipstick is not just a lipstick. It's, you know, she's queering it so that, you know, we get this, you know, we look at it with humor, and then we look at ourselves with humor, because we are using this funny substance that we put on our lips to feel sexy. One question is that, you know, this kitschifying and queering these objects, but then again there's a contradiction. I feel I find it quite problematic, because you see sexuality as a kind of liberating force, and women are always, that is also a stereotype. I mean, women have the power because they are sexy, kind of idea. I think that's quite a problematic area that we enter, don't you think? So, what do you think about these two questions?
I mean, the title of this work, "You Look Nice in the Hair," it's like the most common phrase you could, if we are friends and I say, "Oh, so nice to see you. Oh, you look great in your hair." That's one part of the body that you can actually talk about. I don't say, "Oh, what a nice legs." Then you kind of, that's a sexuality undertone. So for me, it's so important that everyone should own their own body, and you should own your rights to sexuality or not having sexuality. And there is still the women that getting raped, so I think it's still important to discuss these feelings, and you should be able to enjoy your sexuality and own your own body and sexuality, but still you also there is also a fear included sometimes in the sexuality, and that's something we have to deal with together, because the sexuality is something you most of the time do with another person, and that sexuality is always describing a power relationship, and that's also why I use this fetish look, because that's something that's related to the power structure and who's got the power. I'm not telling it, and hopefully it can change, but if you look at the actual power, there is a male-dominated world, and that's not okay. So I think by looking at sexuality, how we are treating each other, how I say hello to you, that's all connected with also a political situation in the society.
Also, we talked. I mean,
I don't know if that was.
That's a very. I think I'm convinced. Also, is there this sense of you are kitschifying these objects?
Yeah, the kitsch. We forgot the kitsch.
Because these ideas are actually cultural kitsch. The ideas that creates these stereotypes is so, you know, kitsch ideas. So it's like you're deliberately using it in a kind of camp attitude.
I don't know what to say about the kitsch. I guess, I mean, that's something. I don't know how do I relate to the kitsch issue. I think that's also a look of the like a consuming style in society, So
it's like a code.
Yeah, it's like
the
a
leather,
code.
The fur.
And then you all of a sudden are talking about what is the consuming society and who do I become in the consuming society. So it's more that I use that kind of language, the kitschy language, to get people to think about consuming.
Because you're also concerned with ideas of taste. I mean, aesthetic judgment, how does taste come about? You know, how do we know what to consume? Who tells us what to consume? And you know, you have these ideas that you think about. As far as I've been reading about your other work. So, so then that question of this style.
I mean, it
comes to the fore.
And if you. In Sweden, it's been very important that the material is pure. If it's wood, it's wood. You can't take plastic and then paint it as wood. And that was a discussion that was very big in the early, around 2003 and 4. That it was to make a debate that you were using fake materials, because the tradition of craft and art that everything has to be genuine, pure, genuine, and you can't really fool around with that. So that's why it was important to like make these gold blobs to discuss that. But hello, the fake gold gives us the same pleasure. It's just a different money value, or the diamonds. And maybe I don't think that questions are they aren't that big today, but I think that was important that happened, because that was a big debate. It was like very hectic debate in the media that time about how you can use certain materials.
Fake materials.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, in Turkey we always use fake materials.
I know, I love it. I love it.
Okay.
So I think you have to put that in the context of being in Scandinavia, a wooden house, a wooden chair. It's
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about the viewer. I mean, what kind of response do you think you awaken in the viewer? Because I mean, clearly, you want a personal kind of, especially in your works that use space. Maybe you can talk about your relationship to space and why you construct works in this way. Is there a narrative that we should be aware of? Because, you know, objects are talking to each other, maybe. But this kind of space and maybe there's a story aspect seduces the viewer. What
I mean, for me, it's when I make my work, I always think about the viewer. Like for here example, it's important that the first thing the viewer meets is him or herself, and you vaguely can see some of the stereotypes objects through the shopping window, but mostly you see yourself. So you are actually facing yourself and your own beliefs or stereotypes, thoughts that you have to deal with. And that's also why we have the snippa on this side, because the snippa is it's independent. And then I think it's important to work with the distance to the objects, that you can't actually touch them, because that's also a way of make the desire bigger. Oh, I want it, but I can't touch it. So the distance, it's also hopefully make the desire bigger to the objects. And then you desire them, and then maybe the best thing that could happen is that the viewer all of a sudden don't believe in the meaning of the object. You see what I mean? So the viewer have to think a whole circle around.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the viewer is very important, and how the body is interacting with the objects and the space. So it always comes back to that: object, space, and viewer or body.
Yeah. So that's. I mean, especially in this kind of work, this is installation. I mean, this is, you know, it's like a transformation within the viewer. That's what you're aiming at, rather than just making beautiful objects.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also, I mean, it's very much tied to identity.
Yes.
This kind of shattering one's identity, maybe, while looking at the work. Okay. Actually, one last question, and then maybe we can ask our viewers to, if they have any questions.
Yes.
What does it mean for you to be seduced by an object? And I'm asking you this as a person first, and then as an artist, and then as a designer.
Yeah.
What seduces you?
What seduces, alltså vad förför mig? Oh my God! I actually have a friend, and she's playing music and making movies, and she says that an object can never make a person cry, but music or a movie very often make a person cry. And I say, but I cry to objects all the time. Not all the time, but it happens that it gets me in such an emotion that it gives me, I have to cry a little bit. And I'm not a crying person, but it's that the objects and the material can touch me that much. And most of the time I think I get that when it's the whole space has a certain feeling or emotion that kind of grabs onto me.
But are there any specific objects that you can talk about? Are these natural objects, or, you know?
No, it doesn't. I couldn't say, okay, I cried to that. Yeah, I said that I cried to a Monet painting, which is a big surprising, a painting that you've been seeing on postcard for the whole your life. When you actually see it for real. For real, huh? It's so strong. And then you all of a sudden understand all the postcards you've always been seeing on this painting, that it actually have a magic in itself, in the way, in the way it speaks. Yeah. Which you can never see at a postcard or internet or
in that sense.
Yeah. So it's not the kind of objects you want to cry to. Maybe it just comes to you.
It comes to you.
Yeah.
But of course, your relationship to objects as a designer is different from that.
Yeah.
I mean, as an artist, it's different.
Yeah.
What about, because I mean, you're a designer for Costa Boda, and you are designing functional objects, which are also very beautiful and artistic. But what kind of different relationship is that with objects?
Yeah, I mean, I also love being able to make functional objects, because the functions are always interacting with the body directly. Like, I have to have this in my mouth, I have to have this in my hand.
Yeah.
And so when I work with function, I also try to, when I make my objects, I try to work with the body again.
Yeah, actually you do. There's so sensuality in the objects, as far as I've seen from the internet. I've looked through. There's always this kind of sensual aspect.
And I guess with my own life and my own home, I guess I'm very picky what's in the house, but not picky in that sense who designed this. It's mainly the spirit or the feeling of an object. So I'm not so interested in the status or the value in the object. It's the emotion, and I'm all the time dealing with that and moving around and turning inside out of stuff to make the right feeling. So I should feel at home, I guess.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
That's great. So any questions from the audience?
Yes.
I think it's very much interesting when you first enter the room and you see yourself in the mirror. And it is also interesting that not, for example, all women likes to see themselves in the mirror in a public place. Because they're not very, they might not be very happy with their body, or we have always problems with our body. We gain weight and then we lose weight, and we always have problems. And when I see your work, for example, I always think not men looking at women, but also women looking at the other women. And in that sense, I think when you first see your body and then you enter, I mean not you enter, but you see the work there, which is very much personal, it kind of gives you that shocking confrontation on a personal level. But my question actually is, I mean, within the installation, this is a shopping window, and it also has connotations for the consumption culture and like the shopping malls, as you already said. Do you think that while putting this window shopping, do you also somehow trivialize? Makes the objects somehow trivial. Like in a shopping mall, you can just pass by and maybe it can, maybe you have the attention there, but maybe you don't. When you look at it, it's very shiny, it's glossy, but at the same time, it's behind the mirror and designed as a window shopping. So do you think that objects also are somehow trivialized by that effect of window shopping?
No, I would look at it in another way. Both, I think, every person has the possibility to, in like a half of a second, realize if you're walking on the street and you see something in the shopping window, you know directly if it's something that interests you. And that means that material have this kind of communication that you know if this is something that interests you. So, and even if it's in a shopping window, it has this kind of communication, and you can't hide for that. So that's also a way of kind of showing that the material are always speaking to you, even if it is something that someone wants you to buy. And then that kind of leads on to the question that you have your own responsibility to decide what you're actually buying. And so I don't think that's a way of trivializing the meaning of the object, that they actually are hiding behind this shopping window. More that you should see the connection of the shopping window you are seeing in your everyday life.
You say that you use the word shopping window, but I wonder if it's also a room of your own.
Yes.
Is it your own room? And if it is, would you like to guide us and tell us a little bit about the room? Could we like go in together or look together?
Yes. I think we all should. That was the plan. That we should.
If we
enter.
can be liberated from the microphones, we can do that.
Yeah.
I mean,
and maybe we should move this. The change are in glass, of course. So we can just move them.
Can I just ask you one thing?
Yeah.
Now, this work is from 2004. Do you carry the subject matter with you in the work you're doing now? Is it still like very present in your current work? Do you think?
I mean, I always work with the whole and the pole, or the structure that we have in power structure we have in society. And yes, I'm interested in how we consume, but more in the consuming society and questions we have to deal with there, as in production and site. So, no, not really. I kind of, but I think that's if you're writing the book, then it leads you on to writing the next book, and you have the questions in you. But I have already dealt with that question, or are already on something else.
Any other? So, yeah, that's great.